We are talking on a very somber and difficult subject because we are looking at the way the Indian judiciary looks at one of the most depressed sections of our society. And I'd like to look at it through the lens of our struggle for the survivors of the Gujarat carnage of 2002, because there's so much to say, I thought I would limit it to that. So our experience, and when I say ours, I'm talking about Citizens for Justice and Peace, the organization I represent, of working for the laborious path of justice for the survivors of Gujarat carnage of 2002 has been rocky, filled with the proverbial highs and lows. What has marked this journey was its uniqueness in that, for the first time in post-independent judicial history, we saw the convictions of powerful perpetrators, 170 people, 124 of whom were sent to life imprisonment. However, the question remains, is the struggle for justice in the Gujarat carnage a battle half lost or half won? What have we seen in the last 20 years after the first convictions? We saw overturning of these convictions by the higher courts. We've seen easy bail granted to the perpetrators of the post-Godhra reprisal violence, which took place in over 19 districts, 300 incidents. Besides, and this is something I need to emphasize, just as after the Delhi massacre of large sections of Bengali-speaking Muslims in 1983 and the Sikh mass killings of 1984 in the nation's capital, almost all the police officers guilty of complicity during the 2000 Gujarat carnage and of subversion of the investigation afterwards have been rewarded with promotions and elevations. The handful of officers who swam against the tide and testified have paid very heavily for it. We have one person serving a life imprisonment in jail. We have others who have been facing criminal charges, including the loss of pension. A vindictive state is doing all it can to intimidate and prosecute them post-retirement. There has also been, and this is very important, a differential, if not discriminatory, sense of justice between the Godhra accused, that is those accused in the train incident of mass arson on 27 February, and those accused in the post-Godhra reprisal killings, in the grant of bail or award of sentences. And this is something that we need to look at because it also finds an echo in the cases of Bombay 1992-93 and the bomb blast, but I'll stick to Gujarat right here. In 2008, an analysis I wrote about the 84 allegedly accused of the Godhra train burning who had been rotting in the jails for 6 years without one bail hearing in either the High Court or the Supreme Court, brought upon me the ire and the anger of the higher judiciary. Bail is a fundamental and prerequisite inalienable right of every accused. And yet we saw a differential standard being applied to those of the Godhra accused who happen to be Muslim and the post-Godhra accused who happen to be from the non-Muslim community who were involved in brutal reprisal killings. Let's look at what happened in the Godhra case, for instance, after the conviction in 2011. In 2011, the High Court of Gujarat upheld the conviction and also allowed the application for bail. In 2012, the Gujarat High Court rejects the bail applications of all the accused. In comparison, the post-Godhra killings, convictions start happening only in 2011 and 12, but within 4, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, they're either acquitted by the higher court or they're out on bail. Even today, in 2013, the Supreme Court intervened and got bail for a couple of the Godhra accused. In August 2017, they had to surrender again when the High Court dismissed their appeal. And today, the appeal in the Supreme Court since 2018 has been pending for close to 4 years without a single hearing. So we see, in fact, as we look at, if you look at the lens of bail and jail being an exception and bail being the norm, there's been a differential pattern being applied. Coming back to the struggle for justice for the Gujarat survivors, 20 years on, it appears that sparse institutional lessons have been learned from the 2004 Best Bakery verdict. One jurisprudential breakthrough has been in June 2009 with an amendment to the Criminal Procedure Code, when actually the witness and the complainant were given a right to actually intervene in the trial. That was thanks to our intervention in the Best Bakery case. But many of the gains of this case have been lost because of the failure of the judiciary to sustain any institutional memory from the carnage cases. First of all, going back in time to 2002 and 2003, it was only in July 2003, 17 months after the carnage, and with a star witness in the Best Bakery case making a public allegation of witness intimidation, that the Supreme Court first got shaken up and intervened. A significant marker was April 12, 2004, when we had a landmark judgment, bold pronouncement, when actually strong words were used in the 40-page order of the Supreme Court. And KG Kannabarian, a doyen of human rights and an advocate, actually said that the scale, I quote, scale of complicity of the government, the investigation and the prosecution and the courts, including the High Court, was actually pointed out in this order. This judgment, remarkable in its righteous indignation and frankness, regretted the denial of justice to a minority under attack. It also exposed and showcased brilliantly the ills that had beset the criminal justice system. This judgment, Zahira Habibullah Sheikh and another Citizens for Justice and Peace versus State of Gujarat, talked about the modern day Neros who were looking elsewhere when Best Bakery and innocent children were burning and were probably deliberating on how the perpetrators of the crime can be saved or protected. It also drew an equivalence between mob terror and bomb terror. Quote, the fanatics who spread violence in the name of religion are worse than terrorists and more dangerous than an alien enemy. Truer still in the India of 2022. Today, 20 years after the carnage that claimed 2,000 lives in retributory violence following the Godhra mass arson, it is this verdict that we need to revisit, because this verdict that raised important points about the rotting illness of our system, where we saw that the High Court, even public prosecutors, the judgment said that prosecutors function more like defense counsel, investigating agency, perfunctory and far from impartial. These were the comments in the judgment. But did this pronouncement go far enough? And that's the question we need to ask 20 years on. Criminal bouts of communal violence targeted at our religious minorities, sanctioned and sponsored by the state, pose a unique challenge given the inherent conflict of interest. The state is prosecuting the state, and by extension, every officer of the prosecuting state possibly is undertaking every effort to ensure the acquittal of accused officers of the state. Although the Supreme Court in this verdict invoked sections of the Criminal Procedure Code and the Evidence Act that give powers to prosecutors and the courts to function independently, no guidelines were set within this pronouncement to ensure robust institutional recall for the prevention of recurrence. Should not the highest court scathingly underline, as it did, the involvement and complicity of wings of the state government, have laid down guidelines to avoid recurrence? Should it not have set serious, not just guidelines, but pointers to ensure that religion did not enter the sphere of political government? Should it not have laid down a principle for the trial of these cases under the chapter on public tranquility, as KG Kannabarian said, read with the Genocide Convention of 1948 to render complete justice, so that wings of the state face an institutional check against pervasive abuse, not just in the Best Bakery case, but in other incidents of mass killing in Gujarat and in the future. We have seen post that perpetrators belonging to the same political dispensation get political power. Post that, we have seen Muzaffarnagar, 2003, Uttar Pradesh. We have seen the attack on minorities through lynchings, and now, of course, the hate speech that is on board. The absence of institutional embedment and recall of the principles of such landmark judicial pronouncements is something that is, I call, the failing institutional memory of our system, that gives us just glimmers of hope every so often, but does not sustain that through the decades ahead. Thank you.